Hey YouTube, welcome back. We have a broad topic here for you today. It is effective HP. So it's not health, it's not how much HP you have, it's how much HP and dodge and block and armor and other sources of damage reduction that you have in your build. There's a couple assumptions that we're going to make throughout this video, but I think that this is a very important video. So oftentimes I make the joke that the Sentinel is the squishiest class. And if you've been in my stream before, you know exactly what I'm trying to say when I make that joke. But if you're new to Last Epoch, if you're new to my stream, if you've never really thought about it or looked at the numbers, you might be confused when I say that the guy who looks like a knight, who looks like a soldier, who looks like the tanky one, is not. Because everyone else has sources of damage reduction that he does not have sources of. So there's a lot to say here. We're going to go over 5 browser tabs that I popped open. We'll look at a handful of builds. Importantly, I will link a lot of information to you in the description of this video so that you can see the work that we've done, the effective HP across almost 20 different archetypes of different kinds of builds and different classes, masteries, and skills in Last Epoch so that you can peruse them. You can make modifications to them if you'd like to. You can find out the effective HP of your own character and find out what it would take to get better. So one of the websites we're going to be using is lastepochtools.com. I will link a bunch of these, but I'll only show you one on the video here today. I will also show you a whole bunch of this website, which comes from lastepoch.tunklab.com. On my Twitch stream, if you type in !tools, I link this website to people very often. And this is one of the tools that's built into TunklLab, and this is the eHP calculator. You'll see a bunch of calculations that are here based on the characters that we have built. We have a couple assumptions, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then on the right side, you'll see the physical damage, non-physical damage will toggle slightly. And you'll see that you have you have average HP, average effective HP. You have effective HP against dots, because dots are very, very hard to mitigate, because block does nothing, dodge does nothing, armor does nothing, glancing blows does nothing. And then the other number here is effective HP versus one-shots. As an aside, average HP and versus one-shots are going to be the same unless you're talking about dodge, because dodge drastically increases your effective HP, and it also feels very comfy, but it doesn't increase your effective HP against one-shots, because the one-shot calculation assumes that you get hit. So before we dive into the beef of this video, let me show you this, and you can pause the video and zoom in and squint. But here's the assumptions that we've made for the video here. So all these characters, we have no Aurora's Time Glass, no Ravenous Void, no Red Ring of Atlaria. These are all very high-end, very rare items that give you damage reduction. Excuse me. If you're using a two-hander, I assume that you're going to use a Titan Heart, because a Titan Heart gives you an excellent source of damage reduction. It's pretty easy to get with 1 or maybe even 2 LP, get some extra stats on there. We need to assume blessings, because oftentimes my characters will have flat armor and percent armor for blessings, but that's not the case for every single build. So we'll make a couple assumptions based on blessings. You can scroll through that if you'd like to. We have to assume some kind of idols. Maybe your idols are going to give you damage, maybe they give you HP, but one of the strongest idols in the game is this one here, which is just percent health and flat health. So we put three hybrid health idols in all of our builds to help assume things and normalize things. We might replace these with class-specific idols that give HP as well, so you can browse those. We have hybrid HP in all slots, so this is glove, belt, boots. We have percent increased HP in all slots, which is body armor, helmet, and belt. And then we only have flat HP on the body armor. So you could increase or decrease those values if you want to, but that's what we're basing our assumptions on. The rest of this, endurance is capped at 60%. That's my assumption that I'm making. Your resistances are always capped, and crit avoid, it's so assumed that your crit avoidance is capped that the eHP calculator doesn't even have a slot for it. It also assumes that your crit avoid is capped. So that's an important thing for you to note. If someone's using a Bastion, if someone's using a shield, they're using a Bastion. If someone's using a Bastion, we assume that the block effect is 700, which is mid-roll for the implicit, and 700, which is about a mid-roll for the blessing as well, and then plus any relevant masteries or skills like Sigils of Hope, for example. So this is what we're based on here. Let's bring this off to the side and let's look at example number 1. So for this demonstration, we're looking at a two-handed Void Knight. And Void Knight is one of those classes where people say like, oh, he's really tanky. He's a Sentinel, so he must be tanky, which you know is not true, or you will know 20 minutes from now. But we don't really have any sorts of damage reduction. So Sentinels by default, we have this node here, which gives less damage taken from nearby enemies, which is relevant, it's fine. Remember, nearby is 6 meters, it's the old Bastion of Honor, not the new one. And then we're two-handed, which means we get to use our Titan Heart here, which is less damage taken while wielding a two-handed melee weapon. So that's about it when it comes to defenses. You don't really get much else than that. We have flat armor. We have flat armor while channeling, and we have % increased armor here. So the assumption of this character, one of the benefits of playing Warpath, for example, is that you get this armor while channeling node. So this is tankier than like an Erasing Strike character, because Erasing Strike isn't channeling. But at the end of the day, you're going to see that the numbers really are pretty small in the grand scheme of things. So let's pop over here. This is eHP calculator number 1 for the two-handed Void Knight. So we're only going to look at the physical damage. You can toggle this if you'd like to see the non-physical damage as well. But for our two-handed Void Knight character, we have just over 18,000 effective HP, and our against dots is about 7,000. So remember, the first and the third number are going to be the same unless dodge is relevant here. So it's something. You'll have to note that for all of these, some of the builds are going to have a lot of assumptions in them because it's hard to calculate everything because there's a lot of conditional stuff that goes on in Last Epoch. One thing that's conditional here is leech. So Void Knights have a ton of leech available to them. I recently played a Void Knight that had 42% damage leech's health, and it could have gone higher than that if I really wanted to min-max it. So remember, like these effective HP, this is like, you know, you're in combat, this one's you're getting one shot, but like the combat one doesn't count for leech. So the effective HP is kind of low, but it has a lot of leech built into it, and this is Warpath, and it's got a good play style, and you can keep moving. All of those we're ignoring. Those are all great points, but we can't do that for every single build. Unless I want to spend the next couple of years putting this video together. So let's move on to the next example. The next example here is, what if we had a Void Knight that instead of being two-handed, used a Bastion of Honor instead? So we have 18,000, 18,000, 7, 18,000. If we put on a shield, this is what we look like instead. So remember, shield only mitigates hits. So our effective HP against dots has gone down, but our average HP against hits has gone up. So we're, instead of being at 18, we're now at 22 just from putting on our Bastion of Honor. I'm not going to show you a whole bunch of Bastion of Honor builds, but let's take a look at just like Void Knight. We have a Bastion on. We took like the squishiest class in the game, the Void Knight, in my opinion. And we put a Bastion on him. This is what our eHP looks like. Our third character here is something that you might think is squishy, but it has access to a form of damage reduction that other classes just don't have. So this third one, remember we have 18 for the two-hander, we have 22 for the Void Knight using a Bastion of Honor. The third one here is 29, and it's 18,000 against one-shots. So the fact that these two are different kind of tells you that there's some dodge involved here. So this is a capped glancing blow marksman character. So this is quite a bit tankier than both versions of our Void Knight. It is a different play style. We are probably not constantly leeching because we need to like dash around as well. But on the other hand, there's a lot of conditional stuff that rogues get that you just don't get in other places. So for example, take a look at Shift. Shift has invulnerability while you're shifting built into it. And this average HP should be much, much higher once you include things like increased dodge or flat. I think it's flat dodge. It's flat dodge per dexterity if you shifted recently. Or sorry, if you've shifted in the past 1 second. So your shift, your movement skill ends up being a cooldown of maybe 2.5 or 3 seconds or so. And for one of the seconds, like a third of the time, your capped dodge. You also, as a rogue, have access to things like Silver Shrouds. You have access to just like literally take no damage. You're very high mobility. There's a lot of good things going on. And that's before you even start talking about decoy. Just getting enemies to go away from you. This is counted as always moving. So it's like, it's a little bit of flubbing here and there. But I think that's an important thing to write down, because as a marksman, you're not standing still and it's hitting things. You're going to be like kiting around, right? So the fact that this is counting always moving. Remember, the Void Knights are also counting the enemy is always nearby in the base Sentinel Mastery. So it's a similar analogy, similar comparison for the eHP numbers. So remember, our two-handed Void Knight was 18,000. Our Void Knight using a Bastion of Honor is 22,000. And our well-built capped glancing blow using an arrow guard, because in my opinion, every single bow character uses an arrow guard because it's the only quiver that exists, is at 29,000. So the last build that I'll show you here, I might sneak in one more, but the last build that I'm planning on showing you is something that I've played on stream pretty recently. I would call this one of the breakout builds of 0.9, the multiplayer patch in Last Epoch. And this is a dual wield character, which means we are taking 9% increased damage, which you can see we've manually input over here. This is a dual wield lightning bug character. So our effective HP against one-shots is 19,000, so it's a little bit low. So it's slightly higher than the, what is it? Slightly higher than the two-handed Void Knight. Two-handed Void Knight is 18. Our dual wield lightning bug is 19. But our average HP, the fact that we have very good armor, the fact that we literally have capped dodge most of the time, because things like Serpent Strike are a bit too strong right now, mean that we have a tremendous amount of effective HP here. So over 100,000 effective HP. We have Ursine, which gives us 16 damage reduction. We have Aspect of the Boar. We have Impervious, which we can proc very easily because it's a melee character. And we even have Hide Skin, which should be built into our endurance threshold here as 1/3 of our HP instead of, it should be 1/3 of our, I guess, 30% of our HP instead of 20% of our HP as endurance threshold. So you can see that once you start adding in dodge, especially with like good like, you know, armor and sources of damage reduction, your character gets very, very tanky. And this is one of the tankiest characters that I've ever played. Of note, we also did a secondary calculation for this same character. If you just stopped dual wielding and you put on a shield instead of telling you what that looks like, I'm going to show you what that looks like. So let's pull up that one real quick. This is a imaginary character, a druid, the lightning bug character using a Bastion of Honor. To me, it's not worth playing this character because it's too tanky and you'd rather just have damage instead. But if you really wanted to take the lightning bug and put a Bastion of Honor on him, this is what your effective HP looks like. Your average is over 200,000. Your effective HP against one-shots is 35,000. Your EHP against dots goes up slightly because you're no longer dual wielding, so you don't have the dual wield penalty on you. And you also have a tiny bit of extra HP from using the Bastion of Honor itself. So that's what the damage numbers, or so that's what the HP numbers look like there. I think I'm going to pull up one more character. Let's take a look at, where was this one here? Let's take a look at this one here. Here we go. So I said that this was a standout build of 0.9, the lightning bug. And I think the other standout build of 0.9 is really worth talking about because it uses something that none of these other builds have used yet, and that's Ward. So Ward is HP. It happens not to be affected by your endurance threshold. It's not affected by endurance at all, actually. But if you can generate a ton of Ward, it does give you good EHP numbers. So things like Exsanguinous, I have not included here because I don't think they're worth talking about. But if you can play a ward-based character with like Glacier as a Sork, for example, well, we have these new nodes that give us ward based on our mana every time that we're using a skill. And for this character, we've assumed having about 500 mana. You can get much more mana than that, and you can get much more ward than this, but we're assuming about 15,000 ward on our Glacier Sork over here. We also assume that this character has a Twisted Heart, which is kind of an endgame weapon, or sorry, an endgame relic, but it's incredibly strong. So that's where we're getting this 15,000 ward number from. Again, like the Void Knight that we talked about previously, these EHP numbers don't account for Leech. So Void Knight has tons of leech, very low effective HP, but tons of leech. This character, the notable thing about Glacier and how much ward that it generates, and especially Twisted Heart of Buceros and how much ward that it generates, is it generates big chunks of ward. It's not ward per second. It's like chunk, 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 and it's always going back up. So when you're in combat, your effective HP, when you also account for how much sustain you have, and like how much you're leeching back in between those Twisted Heart procs, it feels incredibly tanky. I'm actually kind of surprised that Twisted Heart hasn't been nerfed in any way, but maybe I shouldn't talk about that because I still like the item. Maybe we'll make a video on that someday. But these are the kinds of numbers that we're looking at when it comes to effective HP here. In the document that I'm going to leave in the description of this video, we'll have a couple situational things. You'll see that on all the mage builds, so anything that's Sork or Spellblade, we're going to have different cutouts for against elemental damage, because Flame Ward happens to give you another 30% DR against elemental damage in particular, so it means you're very tanky. And some of those mage builds will also be using a Prism Wraps, which gives you a bunch of leech, which is good with Twisted Heart, and also has less damage, less elemental damage taken. You can browse through all the links that I provide in the description of this video on your own time. In fact, I encourage you to play with them, import your own character, and see what your effective HP looks like. When you put on a Bastion of Honor, it's pretty flippin' good. If you want to use something that's not a Bastion of Honor and like use a different shield, you know, Bastion of Honor is... it surprises me that Bastion of Honor is still in the game. Like, maybe we should complain about Twisted Heart someday after Bastion of Honor gets nerfed again or removed from the game altogether. But like, Bastion of Honor, man, it's so strong. But even putting a Bastion of Honor on a Void Knight here, remember our two-handed Void Knight using a Titan Heart for DR was 18. Our Wand plus Shield Bastion of Honor Void Knight only goes up to 22. And like, it's got good leech, it's got a good playstyle. I was kind of imagining this character would be like Abyssal Echo's Devouring Orb character. But when you start comparing it with Flame Ward and, you know, Reaper Form having 2 health bars and, you know, ward builds that use Twisted Heart and Glancing Blows and all the different sources of invulnerability that we've completely ignored for these calculations, it really starts to paint a picture of Sentinel having a very high floor for how tanky it is. If you're a brand new player, if it's your very first character of the league, it has a lot of HP, it fills in your suffixes very easily, you get like a lot of res from your mastery and whatnot, but the ceiling for how high you can push the tankiness of a Sentinel build, especially a Void Knight build, it's really a lot lower than you think it is, which to me is interesting. It's funny to joke about, but instead of just joking about it all the time, I wanted to make this video so you could be in on the joke as well. If you like this kind of stuff, be sure to drop by on Twitch, twitch.tv/ParryThePig, where I stream almost every day. Got questions about this, you can leave them in the comment section of this video here, or you can drop by Discord or Twitch or any of the social media that I have linked down below. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.